Hello, my name is Kathy Summa. I'm a pre-kindergarten teacher at East Boston Central Catholic School in East Boston, Massachusetts. I've been a teacher for the Archdiocese of Boston for the past 33 years. 30 of those have been at EBCCS. I taught 5 years in grade 3 and 28 years in pre-K. When I was asked to do this presentation, I thought about it for a few days before I responded. I had never put together a PowerPoint, let alone create a virtual one for a group of my peers, nationwide. It was a lot to think about. What did I have to say that might mean something? What could someone learn from me? And then I remembered something. Many years ago, I had a conversation with a good friend and fellow teacher about how unprepared I felt entering the field. Sure, I knew my content and I understood how to plan lessons, but at that time I didn't really understand what I've come to learn is one of the most important parts of my job as an early childhood educator: building connections and relationships. I had joked to my friend that if I were ever to teach a college course, it would be on the importance of building and maintaining good relationships in your teaching life. So, that is what I would like to discuss with you today. If you had asked me to describe what teaching was about based on my college coursework, I may have given you some of these words in my answer. But after 33 years in the field, I know so much better. Today I'd like to share with you some of what I've learned and some of what I wish they had taught me in college. I graduated college in the days of neon, big hair, and the dawn of YouTube. And back then, the importance of relationships wasn't stressed as much as the mechanics of teaching. I knew I should have a good relationship with my students, of course, but I didn't truly understand just how important my relationship with their families would be. I didn't understand that my administrators and colleagues could be a lifeline, and I didn't consider that I could reach out to other people who worked with my students or had helpful experience for support. If we spent any time at all on that when I was in college, it really wasn't enough. But it's extremely important. The connections I'll be discussing today will be the connection between home and school, the connection between the educator and his or her students, the connection between the educator and others who may be helpful, and the educator's connection with him or herself. All of these connections are valuable, and all are an important part of being a successful educator. Before I begin, I caution you to not look for perfection, but look for progress. This is a theme you'll hear a lot about today, and I want you to apply it to yourself. Making connections and maintaining relationships is hard work, and it takes time, but I promise you it's time well spent. Will you be able to successfully connect with every child, every family, every colleague? Of course not. But if we're aware and we do our best to try to build these connections, it will pay off in a big way. For the purposes of this presentation, I will refer to home as families and caregivers. But understand that this can include anyone who has a role in raising your student. It could be a parent, step-parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, foster parent, or an older sibling, even if the child is not living with this person. Teaching is far from perfect. We know this. It can be messy, frustrating, and overwhelming. When we begin our careers, although we've earned our degrees and have gained experience through fieldwork and student teaching, we really have no idea what it's all about. The most important lesson I've learned is this. In teaching young children, relationships and connections are the most important thing. You need to have a good connection with your students, their families and caregivers, other professionals, and yourself. If you have good connections, you recognize changes and issues quicker. You have places to go to find support, and ultimately you become a better educator. We can learn from our students, families, and caregivers, our students, our administrators, our colleagues, outside professionals, and even ourselves. There are times that we can learn just as much from the cafeteria worker as we can learn from veteran teachers, if we're open to it. The bottom line is that we are all there for the students and family and caregivers that we serve. As they say, it takes a village. One of the most useful questions I've learned to ask is, how can I help you? What do you need? How can we make this better for you? By listening, respecting, and responding to our students, their families and caregivers, and colleagues, we become more effective teachers. I've learned that it's okay to admit you have no idea how to solve a problem, but that you're willing to find an answer by working together. A big part of teaching is taking the knowledge we've been given, learning as we go, and building on our experience. I really wish I had known this when I began. It would have saved me a lot of heartache. Teaching is messy. But as with many things, we need to make a mess in order to create something worthwhile and beautiful. I love quotes and memes, as you will soon see. I love to learn from the wisdom of others. So I've incorporated several memes and quotes throughout the presentation to support my ideas and also to illustrate the fact that we're not alone. There are others that have experienced the same things that we experience. These two quotes by two amazing women are my why. Why am I talking about this? When I first started teaching, and for a long time after that, I thought I should have all the answers. I thought that my degree granted me the knowledge to know how to handle everything that came my way. Boy, was I mistaken. I felt less than and beat myself up when I fell short. I made my share of mistakes, and there were times when I felt like the worst, most ineffective teacher in the world. But with time and lots of experience, I've learned that I'm still learning, even after over 30 years. It's okay to make mistakes, but remember, in the immortal words of Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. The connection between home and school. To me, the connection between home and school is an absolute priority. Our students' families and caregivers are the experts on their children. We have a lot to learn from them. But it's our responsibility to make families and caregivers feel comfortable with us and to establish a relationship of trust and cooperation. This takes time, but it is of paramount importance. I often tell my families, we're a team and we all want our students to succeed. I use words like allies, teammates, partners, and co-teachers, and I let them know that we're all there to benefit our children. I ask for their ideas. I ask them what works for them at home. I ask them what they need from me. I ask, how can we build a successful partnership? And then I listen. Am I able to incorporate every suggestion or idea? No. But it starts a conversation. And more often than not, it's helpful and we arrive at a solution that works for everyone. I encourage them to reach out to me if I can help them in any way. It's not enough to say that. You must show them that you mean it. I reach out to them for help, to praise their children, and to discuss concerns. I make sure they have various ways to contact me, and I encourage them to use whichever way is most comfortable for them. Am I able to reach every family? No, but I am always available if they want to try. Teaching is not an us versus them dynamic. It is a team approach. The better we work with families as a team, the better it is for the child. Too many times, parents and caregivers feel intimidated or threatened. Too many times, teachers feel that as a professional, they should have all the answers. It is our job to cultivate a relationship based on mutual respect and with the spirit of collaboration. We're here for the good of the child, but we also help families. Parents should be able to reach out to us for help, and we should be able to do the same. The more people the child has on their team, and the more information we have, the better it is for the child. The first thing I do with my families and caregivers is to connect with them on their level. I tell them that first, I'm a mother. My children went through my school. I understand where they are. I was a parent at my school myself. It's a common bond. However, you don't need to be a parent to connect. You may be from their community. You may have gone to the school where you teach. Maybe you have an experience from your own schooling to share with them. Try to think of something that will connect you to their families. I'm sure to tell my families and caregivers that we're a team. We're on the same side. I really can't stress that enough. I also assure them that there is no judgment, and that the more I know, the better I'm able to help. I am here to help their child get what he or she needs. It's not a home or school partnership. It's a home-school partnership. We're all learning. Our students are learning. Our parents are learning how to be school parents. And we are always learning to be more effective teachers. That never stops. So now that we know this, how do we do it? These are all ideas of how I communicate with my families. As this slide shows, I have various methods of contact. I have a class Facebook page and a class Twitter page. I use the Remind and Seesaw apps. I have weekly emails to update all my families on exactly what we've been doing for the week, and I use email individually as needed. I send written notes in daily folders. I have logs in my classroom. I make phone calls when needed, and I have informal personal check-ins at drop-off or pickup. I do tell my parents what my boundaries are in the beginning of the year. What times am I available, and when and how to use which method of contact. And I do stick with those boundaries, unless there's an extenuating circumstance. One of the most valuable pieces of advice I can give when thinking about family caregiver communication is to not only contact family caregivers when there's a problem, but to be sure to contact families when their child is showing improvement or doing something wonderful. Whether it's sending a picture or a video, writing a quick note, sharing a story at pickup time, or sending a text. This helps to break the negative stigma of the note home. It shows the children that you are proud of them, and also shows families that you value their child and their cooperation, and you see their child as more than something that needs to be fixed. Time is precious, so it doesn't need to be anything elaborate, but I've found that families and caregivers truly appreciate it. It opens the door for the families and caregivers to communicate issues with you. Approach issues as something to be solved together, without blame, and not something to be reported. I've had many parents come to me, especially this year, and ask what they can do at home to help their child, whether it's with learning or their behavior. They are viewing me as a true partner, and it's awesome. I begin each school year with an informational packet for my families and caregivers. The last page of my packet is this poem. It also hangs outside of my classroom door as a constant reminder. I cannot stress the importance of driving this point home. When we are a team and we work together, everyone benefits. The connection between educator and student. One of our most important roles as early childhood educators is to build relationships with our students and help them build relationships with each other. We shape our students' attitudes about school and learning. We are setting the tone. At this stage, meeting each student where he or she is and providing them with a positive experience is far more important than developing academic skills. There, I said it. Showing our students respect and building positive relationships with them fosters trust and ultimately creates a better learning experience. We've all worked with people or know of people who are extremely intelligent, but they don't seem to value the people around them, or they don't build good working relationships. It's unpleasant. We want to be sure that not only are we teaching our students, but we are showing them respect, and in the process, teaching them to respect each other and form good peer relations. Meet, celebrate, and value each child exactly where he or she is. I absolutely love this quote. A child is like a butterfly in the wind. Some can fly higher than others, but each one flies the best it can. Why compare one against the other? Each one is different. Each one is special. Each one is beautiful. Of course, we should know what is developmentally appropriate for the children we're teaching, but we need to realize that there's a wide range of normal. Allow children to develop at their own pace within that range and encourage growth, not perfection. Recognize talents above and beyond the expected and try to point out and celebrate each child's strengths. Notice areas where children are struggling and find ways to help. But find something in every child to value, because every child has something. One of the most important things to understand when trying to build a relationship with your students is the old Maslow over Bloom saying. Maslow's hierarchy of needs addresses the student's most basic needs: food, water, shelter, safety, love, friendship, self-esteem, respect, and finally self-actualization, or fulfilling their potential. Traditionally, schools put a lot of weight on Bloom's taxonomy, which is more in line with the educational learning objectives: remembering, understanding, applying knowledge, analyzing, evaluating, and finally the ability to create something new. What I have found, and what many in early childhood education know, is that children must have their basic needs met before they can begin to address learning objectives. Children must Maslow before they can bloom. A hungry, tired, or sick student is not going to be able to learn to the best of his or her ability until those basic needs are met. A student who has experienced trauma of any kind is going to need our help and possibly outside intervention to feel safe. So as early childhood experts, we must remember it's Maslow over Bloom, always. We must address students' basic needs before attempting to go further. Herein lies the challenge. We must do what we can and reach out for help when we need to, but we'll talk a little more about that later. Some students will need more help or time than others, but addressing these needs is necessary to build our relationships with our students and put them in the position to be their best selves. It is important to respect all children where they are in the process. This allows us to celebrate their progress once we take the pressure off producing a product. This absolutely affects the relationship we have with our students and their attitude towards school and learning. In early childhood, how a child approaches their task is far more important than the finished product, whether it's art, STEM activities, or academics. Any child can copy what the teacher does. Any child can parrot back information. That is not a good measure of progress. When a child can tell you why or how, or a child can show you how, that's a much better measure. Too many parents and caregivers, and let's be honest, a lot of administrators are too focused on data, scores, and what a child can parrot back. Just because a child can repeat something they've been taught does not mean they have truly learned it. It is also important to look at growth. A child may not have reached every goal, but think about where they began and how far they've come. Celebrating these things shows the child that they are understood, respected, and valued. The most important work we do in early childhood education is not tangible. Building relationships, social experiences, expression through art and music, practicing skills, experiencing and experimentation, language development, pre-reading skills. Many of us feel pressured to put more pressure on our students by forcing them to produce rather than progress. We must have the courage to explain to families and caregivers that arts and crafts, worksheets, and teacher-directed work is not truly what early childhood education is about. It's not what's hanging on the fridge. It's what's inside the kid. Building a relationship with your students takes time and effort. A lot of time. I've stressed that we must know where these children are developmentally and respect that for good reason. We must also understand where they are emotionally and if they've gone through any trauma. We must find out all we can about the whole child so we can do our best to provide what they need. A lot of this information comes from working with both the student and his or her family caregiver. Build a strong foundation well now, so you will not need to repair the cracks later. I keep pictures of my family in my classroom and talk about them often. My students know that I am a real person with real feelings just like they are. They know that some days are happy days and some days are sad days, and we help each other through the sad days and we celebrate the happy days. We are a classroom family. We make a book with pictures of our families in it, and we keep it accessible in the classroom all year long. My students know that connections are important. I truly enjoy getting to know my students and their families. I ask questions, I pray for family members who are ill, and I let them know that they and their families are important to me. This allows my students to feel safe and cared for, and therefore makes them more likely to take a risk when learning. Don't be afraid to let your students see that not only are you a teacher, but first you're a person. Help your students progress through experimentation and mistakes, and ask questions and let them show you their progress. And resist the urge to dictate too much. Children need to feel free to make mistakes and learn from them. They need to be able to explore and enjoy their learning experience. This quote by Maya Angelou is one of my favorites. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Let's make our students feel good. These are some simple things that I've found helpful when building relationships with my students. Each day we have a welcome and greeting routine, we have a morning routine, and we have transition routines. So the students know what's coming and what's next. And it's comforting for them to have the routines. Ask them questions that show you care. Ask them about their families, their interests, or their events. Ask them about their culture, their language, or their customs. Many of my students speak Spanish as a first language. I am not fluent in Spanish. I know some words, but not many. And I'm definitely not fluent. So I often enjoy asking my children how to say certain words in Spanish, or what foods they have for lunch, and what do they call that in their language. It makes them feel valued, and it makes them feel that you're interested in them. Use language to encourage children to keep trying. When they make a mistake, say things like, "Wow, you're almost there," or "You're so much closer this time. You're getting better and better." That's a different way to do it. Can you show me more? And how proud are you? You did it. Give all children the chance to show off their talents, abilities, and interests, and let them each be an expert at something. and admit and point out your own mistakes. And then model how to work through making a mistake and how to try again. And most importantly, celebrate progress and process and victories together. The connection between educator and others. When I was a new teacher, I was afraid to ask for help. I thought I would be viewed as incompetent or weak. I tried to figure everything out on my own because I thought I was supposed to know it. I made my job a lot more difficult. With lots of time and experience, and some wonderful administrators and veteran mentor teachers, I learned that it's a good thing to seek out advice, input, and feedback from those who've been there. Form relationships with people in your building who can help you. If need be, ask families to be connected with professionals who are working with their children outside of the building. As I've said before, we are all here for the good of our students. To ask for help does show courage and strength. Don't be intimidated by those who have more experience. Soon enough, you will be in their shoes. When I began to think about the many connections we build as early childhood educators, I thought of the homeschool connection and the educator-student connection first. But another very important connection that often gets overlooked is the connection we build with others. Originally, I thought about other professionals, but that is so limiting. Yes, we have a lot to learn from other professionals. Our administrators, mentors, colleagues, counselors, and therapists can teach us so much and are truly invaluable. However, it goes so much deeper than that. I have gained a lot from reaching out to professionals that work with my students outside of school. I've written letters to pediatricians and offered to speak to them about my students. I've spoken to the mental health therapists of my students to get ideas from them and to learn how I can carry over what they are working on into my classroom. I'll share more on that later. I've helped parents connect with other parents for childcare or carpooling. I've even spoken to former students and asked them about what they remember about being in my class and what they liked and what they wished were different. I often reach out to others in my building when I need help translating. As I mentioned, many of our students and their families speak Spanish. Our administrative assistant speaks fluent Spanish, and she's often very helpful in this area. But we also have a cafeteria worker who speaks Spanish and helps us bring the children inside in the morning, who's also very helpful. We truly are a community. When thinking of people who could be a resource to you, there's no end. Growing up, my dad always told me that the custodian should be your best friend. Yes, he was a custodian for a time. But you know he wasn't lying. The custodian can be a wonderful resource, and I know that you already know that. When I say others, those are the people that you come across in your travels. Maybe you have a friend who works in healthcare or a cousin who's a therapist. As long as you don't share identifying information, ask away and learn what you can. You never know where your next solution or epiphany will come from. These are some important things to consider when reaching out to others. You may find help or support in an unlikely place. Just be sure to know what your school's policy is regarding discussing students or policies dealing with privacy, especially when going outside of the school community. Be sure that you build a good relationship with your co-teacher, aide, or paraprofessional. This is so important. Establish what roles you will each have before you begin, and be sure that you're on the same page. Don't be afraid to ask administration or colleagues for advice on students. You could also check with specialists in your building or teachers that have had your students in the past. Seek out others in the building who may be able to help you or may be able to connect you to services, such as your guidance counselor, nurse, or administrative assistant. and as we've mentioned, even the custodian. If possible, offer to collaborate with those that work with your students outside of the building, their pediatrician, their therapists, or their counselors. Ask what you can do to reinforce what they're doing. The more consistency for the child, the better. Just be sure to know your school's policy regarding working with those outside of your school. Do you require special clearance? And what's the procedure when approaching families? This is a tool I learned about through collaboration with one of my students' outside therapists. I have a child who was having great difficulty regulating his emotions. He had experienced a lot of trauma in his young life. Through talks with his guardian, I was able to connect with his outside therapist with written permission. And I had a Zoom meeting with her. His therapist was more than happy to discuss what she was working on with my student, and she offered me resources and advice. I now use this resource with all of my students, and I use the student who knows about the zones as a helper. It has benefited all of my students, especially the child who originally used it. It also offers consistency for this child, that all the caring adults in his life use the same tool to help him. And I have a new contact. This therapist was amazing. This from noticing things with the child, connecting with his guardian, connecting with his therapist, and then getting an amazing resource that's not only benefiting this one student, but all of the students in my class. 10 years ago, through my school, I was asked to become part of a pilot program with the Peter and Carolyn Lynch Foundation in Boston. My school was among the first 3 schools to begin the Excellence in Early Childhood program for Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Boston. Through my work with the Lynch Foundation, I've received support, professional development, mentoring, curriculum, and even furniture. I've been put in touch with an inclusion specialist who can advise me on students I may have a question about, and I have a network of colleagues throughout the city of Boston. The Cephal Pyramid is a tool I was introduced to through my work with the Lynch Foundation. I was fortunate enough to receive training in the Cephal Pyramid model and have made contacts with people who also use it. Collaboration allowed me to gain this knowledge to benefit all my students. This collaboration has done amazing things for me as a teacher and affected me in ways I could never have imagined when I began. I'm so grateful that I took the risk and decided to say yes. It can be more difficult to connect now due to COVID, but now more than ever, it's important to think outside the box. We may not have the same access to our students and families or our colleagues as we once did, but this pandemic has taught us some new ways. Zoom has opened up a whole new world. It's not easy, and while much has changed, we've been given new ways to collaborate and branch out. The connection of the educator to him or herself. Teachers are not perfect. Teachers are not machines. Teachers make mistakes. Teachers need grace. Teachers need compassion. Teachers need help at times. Teachers need other teachers, and that's okay. I think many of us have felt like this at one time or another, and probably now more than ever. We have a lot on our plates. It seems the demands multiply, and because of the restrictions of the pandemic we're experiencing, the ability to do it all diminishes. Because we care so much, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do it all well, all the time. We need to accept that we're human, and that we also have needs. We need to be sure our own needs are being met so that we can support our students, their families, and our colleagues, not to mention our own families, children, and friends. Where do we fit in? By nature, most early childhood educators are nurturers. We want to help. We want to guide and protect our students. We want to give them the best of ourselves and watch them grow and succeed. Never has this been more challenging than now during COVID-19. We have had to face a lot of obstacles. Illness, school shutdowns, hybrid learning, technology issues, being isolated, being restricted. We are learning how to do things in a whole new way. And we're learning as we go, on the fly. But we are doing what we can, and we are providing what we can for our students. Now, how are you taking care of yourself? I got this graphic from the Pathway to Success website, which is a wonderful website run by special education teacher Christina Scully that has many ideas for educators. On her website, she focuses on executive functioning skills, social emotional learning, mindfulness, social skills, and behavior. I really suggest that you check her out online and on social media. She's a wonderful resource, not just for this purpose, but for many things. It's important to recognize that we must take care of ourselves. What do you enjoy? How can you take care of you? These suggestions are just some of the things you can try. If you're feeling overwhelmed or drained, talk to a friend or a loved one. Make a plan to go for a walk. Have a Zoom coffee date if it's someone not in your household. Journal or do another activity that you enjoy. If you're feeling too overwhelmed, there's no shame in reaching out to a professional for help. Please take care of yourself. You are so important. I came across this cute little teacher self-care bingo card on the Teacher to Teacher website. This is another great website for teachers to connect and learn from each other. It's a fabulous resource and a big part of self-care to realize that you're not alone. I do not have 33 years of teaching experience. I have 1 year of teaching experience, 33 times. I told you all I liked memes and quotes, and I figured I'd throw one of my own in here. This is something I say all the time. I tell my parents this every year. No 2 years are the same, and we're always learning something new. Never has this been more true than right now. We are all first-year teachers. Give yourself some grace. I want to thank you for your attention today, and to thank you for all you're doing to educate our littlest learners. I hope that you found something valuable to reflect on. As I've said, we learn from each other, so please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. I'm always happy to learn from others. I hope that you'll enjoy the rest of the conference.